Greetings pimps. Now before you weirdos get all in a huff, this video is not meant as a debunking of climate change's existence but is an explanation of the objective morality around it and to laugh at statists who use non-argument, emotion and authority, not logic. This video was inspired by a random recommended YouTube video I came across, which was some clueless statist complaining about crypto, and out of curiosity I clicked on their channel just to prove that it would indeed be filled with even more emotion-based drivel. Lo and behold, I was correct, and one of the videos was an emotion-based rant about how capitalism causes climate change and climate change is bad. But such is life. We all know statists hold an ideology which is rooted in non-argument appeals to emotion or authority, and no logical argument in favor of the state's existence exists. Now the target of this video is climate change, but we must first get this intro stuff out of the way. All the statist clowns do on repeat when it comes to this is blame capitalism and or corporations. This is of course using the statist made-up version of capitalism, but it doesn't matter, as the same can easily occur if businesses were all worker-owned. The workers controlling the business does not change human greed. Even if it did, it's still an appeal to emotion, not logic, to blame the faux version of capitalism. Now as for corporations, this one is funnier in my opinion, as statists beg the state to do something about the evil corporations, but the corporations control the state. In a stateless world, such large corporations would likely not even be able to exist due to competition and the existence of thousands of separate towns, communes, etc. that disallow such corporations from operating. Even if they did exist, however, it is much easier to shoot a CEO without the state existing if a company starts acting up and committing objectively immoral acts proven by UPB, not to mention that these wacky statists tend to not even support nuclear energy and still think it's some menace which creates barrels of toxic green waste, and cite the appeal to emotion of Fukushima as some all gotcha, even though tech was in his way past that. Wind and solar are simply not viable worldwide options, not to mention how much more room they take up just to output way less energy, and how often they need replaced and the waste the dead ones, so to speak, create. But we are not here to argue semantics and emotion of what a state or non-state solution is. We are here to discuss the objective morality of climate change and the surrounding nonsense. Now it is quite simple, really. Before I explain, it must be stated that this video is using UPB, which cannot be logically argued against in the context of debate, and all attempts to argue against itself detonate instantly, just as saying language has no meaning instantly self-detonates in the context of debate. Thus, the actual explanations we are about to get to cannot logically be argued against no matter how much you try. The answers here are quite obvious to anyone who understands basic UPB, but they are interesting. It should not need to be said on this channel by now, but the very existence of the state itself is objectively immoral, thus any statist solution to so-called climate change is objectively immoral. Committing climate change is the real soul of this discussion though. Since objective morals do not exist on levels, if committing climate change were immoral, any pollution whatsoever would be considered immoral, including breathing. Of course this is not so, as polluting is not immoral as long as it is only on one's own property, and technically the act of polluting is never immoral. The act of property destruction or assault is. These are separate acts and must be judged on their own. And yes, for you cringe lords out there who don't like it, the existence of private property is objectively null, not moral or immoral. You can own it but are not morally obligated to. Your only so-called arguments against private property are non-argument appeals to emotion or authority. That said, climate change is thus a null action in all cases and not immoral or moral. If you are, for example, dumping toxic waste onto your neighbor's land, this is immoral due to it being the act of property destruction or assault, whatever term you prefer, not because it's climate change. If you were somehow able to make the dumping of toxic waste to cause climate change but not be an immoral act, such as assault, that would be a null action. That of course is not possible in this hypothetical, but it proves UPB easily accounts for the possibility with the required separation of all acts in order to morally judge them objectively. Now of course something is creating smog as you see in cities would be considered an immoral act if the people were not informed of it being created before moving there voluntarily. One could voluntarily decide to live in such a place absent the state's existence, and thus the making of smog would be a null action towards that person. However, smog is, in this hypothetical, all over the entire city, thus is an immoral act of violence. The climate change is once again not an immoral act, the assault, so to speak, is. If the smog could, hypothetically, be created without committing assault, its creation would be null. Now before you freak out and ask, what if the act is killing something not human? I'm going to cover it. Firstly, UPB only applies to humans as they are the only species capable of understanding it. Since a lion, for example, cannot understand UPB, it is illogical to say they must adhere to it lest they be immoral. You cannot hold a lion morally responsible for murder, as no lion can understand UPB or even the word immoral. That part sounds silly, but it must be said in order to compare here. It must also be said that a human does not have to understand UPB in order for it to apply to them, as other humans understand the concept as a whole. If one human can understand it can be assured all humans, given they were the same person, would too. In regards to the lion, same goes for Mother Nature. Mother Nature is not human, thus it is not possible to be immoral or moral towards it. This is why if climate change occurs without committing any sort of other action with it, such as assault on another person, the entire situation would be null, not moral or immoral. Thus climate change by itself can objectively be declared a null action. Assault is immoral. Climate change is null. This cannot be argued against in the context of debate without instantly self-detonating. The moral of the story here is that statists are losers with emotion-based ideologies and are once again arguing over something that isn't even an immoral act to begin with. Thus, arguing over climate change is a waste of time because it can never be a bad action. Sure, you can have the opinion it is bad, but that can never change objectivity. Arguing over climate change is literal and fighting, as so many things are. This is why I will never unironically engage with anyone who wants to claim it is real or fake, and why this video does not take a stance either way, because the answer doesn't matter in the context of debate or the context of the universe. Now pimps, I think we have covered all there is on this subject. If you have any questions or inquiries, leave them in the comments. Please refrain from making comments thinking I took a side on whether it's real or fake, as I literally just explained that taking a side is cringe in fighting and I won't do it. Also, please refrain from making non-argument appeals to emotion or authority. Thanks. Anyways pimps, we out.